Okay, so I will now call this meeting to order at 2:32. And before we get started, I would just like to respectfully acknowledge that the SFSS is located on the traditional unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, which includes the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Coquitlam, and Katzie nations. And unceded means that these territories have never been handed over, sold, or given up by these nations, and we're currently situated on occupied territories. And remembering that as we're all working from home throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, that we're all working from different lands, and that we should all be taking some time every day to consider the lands that we're so privileged to work on today, and making sure we're really centering all of our work around decolonization and with our Indigenous peoples always at the forefront. So we will move on to our roll call of attendance then. I'll start off with myself. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gabe Leosis. I'm the VP University Relations and Chair of the Governance Committee. My pronouns are he, him, his, and my access needs, yes, my access needs are met. We'll move on to our VP Finance.
Hi, everyone. My name is Corbett. Pronouns are he, him, his, and all my access needs are met. Thank you.
Thanks, Corbett. VP Student Services.
Hi, my name is Matthew Provost. My pronouns are he, him, his. My accessibility needs as of right now, I'm doing double duty. I'm doing childcare for my mom. So if my brother comes in here, I might have to step away and help him out with whatever he needs. But other than that, I'm good to go.
Thank you, Matt. At-large representative.
Hello, my name is Balkis. I go by she, her, hers. Access need. My camera will be off most of the meeting.
All right, thank you, Balkis. We'll move on to our faculty representative for science.
Hi, my name is Wei Chen. Pronouns he, him, his. My access needs are met.
Thank you. We'll move on to society staff. We have our campaigns research and policy coordinator.
Hi, everyone. It's Sarah, she, her, and hers, and all my access needs have been met.
Thank you, Sarah. We also have our transition manager.
Hi, Lawrence here. Pronouns he, him, his. Access needs. Actually, on Friday, just added a desktop unit that lets me stand up once in a while. So if the background changes, that's what's going on, and actually finding it quite a nice change. But it helps. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence. I've actually been wanting to get one of those for a while. I'm glad to hear it helps. Okay, council representative, the Science Undergrad Society Councillor Zaid has sent in his regrets. The counselor for political science, Helen, the vice chair of council, is supposed to attend in his place, just so we have someone from council represented here in the discussion. She will be late, however, coming in at around 3:15. Corbett will be back, thank you. So we'll move into the adoption of the agenda, item number 4.1. I'll read the motion. Be it resolved to adopt the agenda as Awesome.
I'm here too.
You did. You skipped Asab again.
Do you know what needs to happen? I think Asab's name actually needs to be on the list, because I will forget anyone who's not on the list, plain and simple.
It's okay. Well, I'm a committee member too, but
I know. Okay, we'll make sure to put that on the record that you'll be on the list next time. We will make you feel included. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Also, my pronouns are she and her, and I'm just eating right now my lunch, so I'll have my camera off for the first bit.
Okay. Thank you, Wasib. And I forgot to mention too, I kind of have a piece of pizza here, so I might start chomping down on that when someone else is talking. Okay, Nat, I haven't forgotten anyone, have I? Okay. Well, if I did, feel free to make me feel bad about it. Be it resolved to adopt the agenda as presented. Do I have a mover for this motion?
Matt.
Thank you, Matt. Is there a seconder?
Balkis.
Balkis, thank you. I want to add a motion under the adoption of the agenda to ratify regrets from Zaid Lari. Are there any other amendments? No? Okay, so I can move that amendment. Can somebody, do I have a seconder for that amendment? Cue Jeopardy music here.
Matt.
Okay, thank you. All right, all those in favor of that. Well, is there any discussion on the amendment? Okay, we'll move back. No, we won't. Sorry. All those in favor of the amendment? Seeking unanimous consent, and please unmute your mic if you dissent or abstain. And I'm expecting no opposition on this amendment, so that amendment will be carried unanimously. We'll move back to our main motion then, which is be it resolved to adopt the agenda as amended. So we will move to a vote on that one. So all those in favor of the main motion, seeking unanimous consent. All right, and I'm seeing no opposition, so that motion will is carried unanimously. We'll move into the next motion, which is ratification of regrets. So, pardon me, I'm a little bit hiccupy today. So, be it resolved to ratify regrets from Zaid Lari. Do I have a mover for this motion?
I'll move.
All right, Wei-Chen moves. Is there a seconder?
Corbett seconds.
Corbett, thank you. And discussion. What did Zaid say to me? Zaid wanted to attend, but he had work called him in, and he tried all that he could, but he couldn't get rid of it. So he had to send in his regrets. Any discussion or questions? Okay, so I'll move to a vote on that one then. All those in favor of ratifying regrets from Zaid Lari, seeking unanimous consent. All right, and that motion, seeing no opposition, is carried unanimously. We have no minutes to ratify, so we can go right into our discussion items. 5.1, which is update from the bylaw review working group. So I'm not expecting too much discussion on this item. I just kind of wanted to give an update from the working group. I know all of us are members of that working group. This is more of an update on some of the documents that I sent out in relation to some of the discussion that occurred at the working group. Firstly, I sent out the revised executive officers portfolio that we approved to support in principle 2 weeks ago at this committee, and that included changing. It includes a few changes. The first one was changing first vice president to vice president internal and organizational development. The second one was changing VP finance and operations, changing the word operations to services to be vice president finance and services. I had forgotten to include under VP internal that they are a signing officer. That was included. Added Balkis's suggestions under VP equity and sustainability. And Wei-Chen has actually brought to my attention there is a typo in there, so I will fix that as well. And those are really the only changes that were made to that. So that revised document was sent out to you for the record. The next document was around the bylaw amendment chunks that we were discussing in the working group and how we're actually going to split this up in relation to the amount of special resolutions we're putting on the AGM agenda. So again, the first one around Societies Act compliance and kind of just bylaw housekeeping, making sure that everything is aligned with each other, and taking out some confusion in terms of definitions, etc., and including some things around dissolution and record keeping. Special resolution, I'm just going to say SR2, is student group definitions and clarification, cleaning up some stuff around DSUs and FSUs, and adding a definition for constituency groups. And Special Reso 3 is all around the board and council merger, and introducing that new governance model that we have been discussing. And the last briefing note was put together by Sarah around board of directors structures, councils, and executive committees at other student societies, including UBC, Capilano, Kwantlen, and some others. So that will be helpful for us when trying to put together our model in our bylaw review. And if anyone wants to contribute to the update from the working group, or if I kind of missed anything you think might be integral to what we discussed, please let me know. If else, we can move on to the next discussion item and actually get into some more discussion around the bylaw review. Nice, nice. Okay, we'll move to 5.2 then. I wanted to focus today. Okay, it wasn't sent out with the governance agenda, but it was sent to the bylaw working group around the discussion we had at the last governance committee around what happens when members of the executive committee under our new model, where seats become vacant, what power council has in terms of interim appointments, and when by-elections actually occur. That briefing note was sent to the bylaw review working group, and I wanted to open that up to discussion. Hopefully everyone looked at it. It was a proposal that I put together around what by-elections, vacancies, and interim appointments would look like. And I apologize, I'm trying to pull it up so I can explain it for those who haven't seen it, but for those who have read it, please let me know if you have any comments right now. Okay, let me start off with a more simple question. Who hasn't had a chance to read it?
Just double checking if
I
I
have-
think of the right doc.
Same here. I'm just going over.
I'm sorry, which doc is this?
It's the one titled Proposal, Executive Vacancies, Interim Appointments, and By-Elections.
Okay, yeah, I got it.
Okay, cool. And my computer is very slow when I have a video conference going on at the same time, but I'm trying to do other things, so apologies. But this is taking a minute. Alrighty, so when we think about by-elections in our current bylaws, by-elections for the board, they are actually restricted in terms of the amount of times you can have a bylaw or by-election in 1 year. You can only have by-elections in the fall semester, or else it would remain vacant for the rest of the year. What I think we were trying to discuss, oh, and sorry, if the number of board members is so vacant that it falls below quorum, would also warrant a by-election. So in the proposal, I proposed that, and this is all about executive committee elections. We haven't even gotten to council elections yet, which we'll hopefully touch on in this meeting. But I propose that in the new bylaws that there be 3 times within the year that a by-election actually occurs. Within the summer semester, once within the fall semester, and once in the spring semester concurrently with the general election. So in terms of when a by-election would happen in each semester, it would be around the same time each semester. So I go into that in detail. For example, the nomination period would start around week 5 and end at around week 6. Campaign period would start week 7, go to about week 8 or the end of week 9. And voting period would happen over the course of 3 days after the week that campaign period finishes. That would be the same, happen during the same time frame in each semester, the summer, fall, and spring. And so a vacancy would have to occur a full week before the start of nomination period in any given semester for a by-election to happen. And if the vacancy happens after that given point, then that seat would have to be filled by way of by-election at the next soonest scheduled by-election or general election. And I gave some examples. So let me run through an example. So example number 1 would be, let's say that the Vice President Finance and Services were to become vacant within week 2 of the summer semester. Unlikely, but has happened before. That would leave enough time for a by-election to be called for that same semester in the summer semester with the commencement of nomination period in week 4. In that meantime, Council would appoint an acting Vice President, Finance and Services from amongst Council to serve in that office until a student is elected into that role. Example number 2 is, let's say the office of the VP Finance were to become vacant anytime after the start of week 4 of the summer semester, which is the threshold in which a by-election would need to happen. Because it would be past that deadline of the by-election for the summer semester, then the next possible chance to hold a by-election for this position would be during the next scheduled by-election, which in this hypothetical case would be in the fall semester. So Council would appoint an acting Vice President Finance that would remain in that position until the fall by-election, which, depending on when this vacancy occurred, that acting director could or acting officer would remain in that position for potentially up to 4.5 months. And I also talked about how for these 2 examples, if the vacancy occurred in the fall semester instead of the summer semester, it would kind of be the same protocol. In the first case, if it happened before the start of nomination period, the by-election would occur in the fall semester. For the second example, where it happened after the deadline, it would be the same, with the notable difference that the by-election would occur concurrently with the general election in the spring semester. And so the individual who is running for the vacant office would serve in that office. So let's say it's the VP Finance again. That individual would serve in the office of the VP Finance as an acting director immediately following the spring general election until the start of their official term on May 1st, and continue to serve in that role for their 1-year term. And then we talked about what happens if it's the vacancy of the president. And we discussed how we didn't want Council, we thought that it wasn't the best idea for Council to appoint an acting president in regard to knowledge and a smooth transition. So now let's imagine example 1, but it's the office of the president. So again, let's say the office of the president becomes vacant in week 2 of the summer semester. That would still leave enough time for a by-election to be called for that same summer semester, with the commencement of nomination period happening in week 4. However, because it's the presidency that was vacated, the line of succession laid out in the bylaws would mean that the vice president internal would assume the office of the president and be the acting president. Council would then appoint an acting VP internal to serve in that role until a student is elected into the position of the president. Following the election of the president, of course, the acting president, which is the VP internal, would resume their normal duties as VP internal. And if you scroll all the way down, I tried to take that whole complicated explanation and encapsulate it under a potential bylaw to replace our current bylaw around by-elections in our draft bylaws. So let's have a discussion on that, and I want to hear folks' thoughts.
List, I guess.
Go ahead, Corbett.
So going on our last conversations, this is primarily by limiting the number of by-elections that can happen each term, or in general, it's try to kind of avoid back-to-back by-elections in case, we feel like council fills a position temporarily, we run a by-election for whatever reason, either the position doesn't get filled or somehow a new position becomes vacant, then immediately start and call another by-election for 30 days or so. It's, it could be exhausting or tiring. Financially, maybe more cost for it, but honestly, if we budget for like a full-time IEC, then cost may be the same regardless. Because currently we budget for two by-election and a general election and referendums anyways, so it's not like a big concern. So yeah, primarily it's just this system is to try to prevent back-to-back by-elections, right?
Yes.
Okay. Would it be simpler just to say that we just you can call a by-election, or the council can call a by-election for 30 days after a vacancy occurs or something along that lines, unless a previous by-election has already happened within a certain amount of time period. So it's a little bit more floating the dates as opposed to fixed. Because I'm not sure if it simplifies the language or if it causes more confusion because people have to backtrack, but that could be another way of doing this too. Instead of having to worry about specific, if it was within the first 6 weeks or after 6 weeks.
That's an idea, for sure.
Because the idea is I don't know if it's a good idea to have somebody potentially sitting around in a position for 4 months as interim either in some scenarios. But I also understand it can be confusing to say say there's has to be like a 6 week gap or so between by-elections. It might end up working out basically the same setup as we have now, right? But so I'm trying to balance between not having somebody from council sitting in a position for too long where they would have a difficult time maybe doing the role, versus a weird scenario where we have cascading by-elections. Because one example I can see of that happening was in Ontario, where the Student Federation of the University of Ottawa, when they were going through their scandal, which eventually killed their society. Leading up to that, and also during that time period, a number of their execs, one at a time, would resign, and then I think one resigned early, and then one or two resigned after the scandal happened with their president, their financial scandal. And I know they did try to run a by-election, and either nobody ran because by that time, the society was more or less cut off for funding and it looked like it was on its way out. So why would anyone want to run for a position that's going to die off? I'm just trying to think if we had some kind of weird cascading situation with us, how would we handle it in either in your model or your proposal or a different one? Like, I guess in your case, because you're fixing it and basically in certain periods, it would be fine. You might have some periods where the interim person might be in for a long time, for 4 months or so. Okay.
Yeah, some things to think about there. I want to invite others to contribute as well, if there are any thoughts.
Dominated that. I'm just going through the bylaw change right now. The proposed ones.
Sure. Yeah. Well, sure. I'm sensing that it might be helpful for folks to kind of rescan it and compile their thoughts. So, is this something we feel comfortable with still discussing today, or bringing it to the working group maybe for next week? Next Monday.
I mean, I personally don't. Sorry, list. My bad. I personally don't have any suggestions. I did take some time to look through the document, and I think the timeline looks good. I mean, yeah, I don't have any like particular suggestions. I'm glad that it does give us the capability to call a by-election at any point in time if need be. I don't know if that's something that has happened in the past. It seems like most of the bylaws have been reserved to the referendum or having a SGM situation, but yeah.
Thank you, Asib. Corbett?
Yeah, the closest the SFS had to like some kind of cascading, vacancies or successive vacancies was 2018, summertime. I think within a month or two, the Alex Social Sciences rep left or stepped down because she went to another school, and then by the end of the summer term, one of the at-larges was missed 2 meetings and 2 scheduled meetings and was kicked off the board, though there was more to it than that. And then the president got impeached within 6 weeks or so of that. I don't remember the exact date. Sorry, maybe less than that. So I think within 5 to 6 months, there was 3 people down, 3 positions open, rather. So in this case, if it's some weird scenario, similar scenario that happened, council could still like backfill almost all positions, for at least 2 of those. Well, technically, that large, the fact reps won't exist anymore anyway, so it doesn't really, maybe that's a pointless example now under this. So, yeah, because we haven't had a situation, I don't think, where in the SFS where we've literally had entire sections of the execs just like leave or get impeached or whatever. We've had one big impeachment in 2006, but I don't think there's been a lot of history of execs dropping down. It's only been either nobody runs or the people that run get disqualified or something. So I don't think it's probably an issue for us, like either system we have in place. It's just, do we want to have an interim person potentially filling in a role for a longer period of time? Like, what's the kind of ideally the max time they should be being interim in, and then kind of model our process around that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I put it in there somewhere that like at the earliest possible date where they could vacate the office, without having to call a by-election for that same semester. It could be for up to 4.5 months. So that is a significant, that's about, that's more than a third of one term. However, I mean, I think it still provides us more leeway than our current by-election system does. And in reality, I'd rather have someone in that position in the interim for that period of time rather than it being vacant for a much longer period of time. So I guess you kind of have to pick and choose. Asad?
Just one small comment. I think under number 3, I think the language could be clarified.
Sorry, are you looking at the actual draft bylaw?
Yeah.
Okay.
Under it says a by-election must be called to fill a vacant office if the vacancy occurs before 1 week before the start of nomination period. Is there a way to say that more clearly? Because I'm assuming it means like if it's earlier than the week before the start of nomination period, it has to be a by-election needs to be held. But the language seems a bit odd.
I agree. The language is a bit wordy. That is what it means. Of course, if anyone has suggestions on better ways to word that, I definitely want to hear that. And of course, this is a draft too, so we can
of course.
Continue to edit the wording as needed.
Also,
no, Asad, you can finish your thought.
My other question around this one is about the 1 week thing. Is there a particular reason why it's 1 week? Because I think if it was a situation where it was like 1 month before nomination period, is it really a necessity to call a bylaw or not a bylaw, a by-election at that point in time? Oh my God.
Okay, so your question is why is it 1 week before the start of nomination?
Yeah.
My reasoning was just so that in case the vacancy does occur, like literally right on that deadline, that there is enough time for the election to actually be organized, right? Because the IC would have to get organized. The actual election would have to be called by council. And if the vacancy occurred literally 1 day before the start of nomination, it's not logistically possible to organize a by-election in 24 hours.
That
was my thinking, though.
Like more time than a week, but
oh, more time than a week. Okay, what would you suggest, or would anyone suggest? Two weeks? Because then that also would mean it kind of gets pushed back a little bit. So then the vacancy would have to occur in week 3 of the semester. Sarah says perhaps 2 to work with the board meeting schedule better, or 3. Yeah, that's smart. I'm also wondering too, like for normal general elections that happen in the spring, nominations period is 2 weeks, but does it really need to be 2 weeks if it's just for one position? Like if the by-election's happening in the summer or fall just to fill one position, could we shorten the nomination period so then that leaves more time for a bit of a cushion? Sarah?
Sure, I guess like one of the changes that we've made in the last couple of years is allowing students to submit electronically. So now you don't have to physically go into the student center, you can submit a PDF. I guess the leaving 2 weeks is kind of giving people time because the normal elections fall during reading week. People might be off doing things. or studying. So it's kind of giving them that extra time. Does everyone need that? Definitely not. But I think 2 weeks kind of allows a little bit of a buffer. It just depends what time of year it happens. I think that's the trouble. If it's in the middle of the semester, it's usually okay. If there's like a reading week or a long weekend, it might get a little bit trickier.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Corbett, you're next.
Yeah, similar to what Sarah said, it's to a certain extent about prep time, right? For an individual, 1 week to decide if you're going to run for a position is often not enough. I don't think. Some are more people, more organized, are more prepared than others, but we kind of have to have a bit of a buffer for others. So yeah, I recommend at least 2 weeks.
Okay. Okay, we can keep it at 2 weeks. I feel like that's smart. But in terms of the vacancy occurring before nomination period, I think 2 weeks, personally, 2 weeks is probably good enough. Thoughts? 2 weeks before. But are there any kind of other overarching comments around this draft or concerns? Okay. So once again, this is a draft too, and I expect that we'll look back at it a number of times before we actually come to a conclusion. So, but we can go ahead and make that change for 2 weeks before nomination period starts. So that's good. Okay. Is it all right if I move on? Oh, wait, Chen, go ahead.
Yeah, I think like same point as also like it was a little confusing to point number 3. I think number 4 as well, like where it says pursuant to bylaw 16, if the vacancy occurs after the start of the week before the start of the nomination period, like that part is just kind of confusing. But maybe can you clarify that as well?
Yep.
Yeah.
So it was 16, 3, and 4. Yeah, I'll go back and try and figure better wording for that. I was just trying to get it down on paper because we were also trying to explain this in a meeting, and it was very difficult trying to explain it in words. So I was trying to put it down on paper. So we had something at least to refer to as we were discussing. So yeah, we can definitely go back and change that. I'll give it 10 more seconds for any more comments. 10, 9, 8. I'm kind of going Poom style here. I don't know if anyone has ever been in Poom's meetings. He counts down before he moves on. Anyway, so my next point of discussion that I wanted to bring up, and it's an important one, is around council elections and how council elections should be occurring under this new model. Of course, right now, under our current bylaws, council elections are not centralized at all. It is under the constitutions of student unions, how they decide council reps are appointed. Council reps can be also tied to, for example, I know some student unions, their president's always their council rep. Council reps can kind of get appointed at any time during the year. It's not always completely democratic in terms of Sometimes it's literally just 10 people sitting in one room that elect one person to represent that student union on council. It doesn't necessarily go to the entire department or faculty. And also in terms of vacancies, if a vacancy occurs, how does that work? How do by-elections work for council? Are we gonna go for a more centralized approach where council elections happen all at once, where they need to be run by the IEC, maybe exec and council elections happen at different times to stagger them? I want to open that up for discussion. I think the main question here I'm posing is how much should council elections be centralized, and how much should it be left up to the individual student unions and constituency groups? Well, more so student unions to influence their seat on council. And again, I think this is something we can look at other student unions for motive or inspiration as well. Balkis?
Do you have any idea how the GSS or AMS runs like this kind of election?
Yeah, for the GSS, I believe we met with them last week, and their elections are very much decentralized, where it is up to their they call them caucuses. Their caucuses really run the elections, and if a vacancy ever occurs, they run the election and elect a person to a vacant seat. In terms of UBC, I do not. Wei-Chen?
No, just kind of the same question as well, Keith. If wondering if anyone has any examples, like AMS or any other big student unions that has a lot of like departments. But.
Yeah, well, I think one thing that I was discussing with Corbett was actually communicating with someone from AMS. I think would be very helpful for us, because I think they are kind of the longest student union that uses a model like this, so they would have a lot of experience with council elections and kind of the pros and cons of running those, and maybe even potentially sitting in on one of their meetings to figure out how they operate. Matthew?
Yeah, I think it's going to take a little bit of while to like organize the way it is run, like with elections for council, because there are so many seats. But I think it would be good to reach out and get feedback. But I think it would be good to take, I guess, a more decentralized approach and look at the pros and cons, because some of the seats on council, the DSUs or, you know, constituency groups that they're a part of, some of them are like way more like seats, or like, you know, there's more students involved, and then some of them you only have like a handful of students, right? So it's like you don't want to force them to like go through elections if there's only like 10 people, or like, you know what I mean? Like, unless if there's like, if they all just kind of like nominate someone, or someone puts their name forward and then they kind of just go from there. But yeah, I think it would be good to find a little bit more feedback on the way it can run, because there are so many seats, and then it'll also change the way, and like we look at, so what do we do if like no seats are filled? It'll change that protocol as well.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, I think there are definitely a lot of pros and cons, and actually writing those out and comparing, you know, what the advantages of those are and disadvantages of those are. I think that should definitely be an action item to take out of this meeting? Balkis?
I think I like the idea of standardizing elections, but I realize it's a lot of seats, and that might be way too many like elections to run at once. So what if we hold exec elections within like a month's frame, and then also like have it as a requirement that the student unions and constituency groups have their elections within a certain time frame. But I just see it being difficult for IEC to manage all that.
Yeah, it's a valid point. And if we are looking for a more standardized approach, we really have to reconsider the structure of the functionality of the IAC as well, which is again another whole discussion. But I do personally like the idea of having like exec elections in the spring, and then somewhere in the bylaws requiring that student unions hold their election within a specific period of time. Because I don't know, when we're talking about standardization and centralization and decentralization, I think that some of the main issues we're trying to tackle, one is turnover, and two is making sure that there aren't a bunch of vacancies all happening at once. And also transfer of knowledge, I suppose. So I think like this idea has been floated of like having spring elections for council, and then a period of time over the fall semester where council elects. So there's kind of two separate elected terms where execs start, I don't know, maybe on the 1st of May and then end on April 30th, which is what we do now. And then maybe council's term starts at a different time and ends at a different time. That's just me thinking out loud. Was there someone else on the list? No, there wasn't. But I'm sensing that from the few people who have spoken, we're kind of looking for a more centralized approach. Balkis?
I think I definitely started off wanting a more centralized approach, but I realized like centralizing stuff within the SFSS is what led to issues between council and the board in the first place, and that's kind of what led to the board just centralizing everything within the board. So I kind of just want to avoid something like that in the future. And while I do want to ensure that things run democratically, I kind of also want to give that agency to groups with guidelines. But that's why I don't want to be like super hands-on with the elections or centralizing specifically the like council elections. But yeah, not saying I have suggestions yet. I do think we'll have to see other schools and how they run it, because clearly like it's been successful for them. So let's see what they're up to, and that might be a good source of inspiration with our context too.
Thanks so much. Yeah, and honestly, I'm not too worried about suggestions right now. I'm just trying to do some brainstorming here. So I really appreciate that. Thank you, Balkis. Matthew, yeah, Matt, go ahead.
I think it would be good. I know it's sometimes difficult for like the DSUs or constituency groups to have like a number of like how many are in like their certain like collectives, I guess. But I think it would be good to maybe like if it's members, if these groups have like X amount of members, then they have to hold an election, or anything under that, then they could do it by nominating someone or putting a name forward if there's not enough people. Like, I don't know how that would work or if they'd be able to do that, but I think it might be easier to centralize that way. So you don't have a bunch of elections, but the student or the DSUs that are bigger, then they would have to hold elections. But I don't want them to like have to feel like they have to go through elections. But I think it just might be easier, like it might be more fair instead of some people just putting their name forward and then just like, because you don't know if they might win an election. So there could be a couple ways that we can do that. Like smaller ones can just put a name forward, and then ones over X amount of people can, I don't know, hold an election or something like that.
Thanks, Matt. Corbett, you're next.
Maybe this was answered earlier, but I missed it. But could we ask staff, like maybe Anna, if she can do her best to reach out or through minutes or whatever to see when different student groups do their elections? Because I know a good chunk of them do theirs in the spring, but there might be some that do it in the fall or do it every term. I think like SASU, at least in the past, had a lot of like almost all their elections happen semesterly, and like if the exception of, I think, of either the rep that goes to the like SAS rep or their council rep, that it's like a year-long position. It'd be good if we map that out, just to see kind of what it looks like. Yeah, that'd be great to have some stats, just so we can see, because I expect that if we're respecting their systems going forwards, that it'd be nice to see like from a how much of a workload it could be for IC. So like if a good chunk of them are in the spring during roughly around the same time as the exec elections, IC wouldn't be able to do both, or else we'd have to hire a bunch more students to handle that or to lead that. But if a bunch of them are in the fall, then that would be easier for them to handle that, right? Especially if it's spread over like a couple months or something. But yeah, some data would be nice.
Yeah. I'll write that down as an action item. We can ask Anna about that. Thank you, Corbett. Wei Chen?
When you talk about like formalizing a council election, does that mean like also like their respective like positions within like the Department of Student Unions, like their president, their VP finance or whatever?
No, mostly just the council representative.
Okay, so like that will their like internal like position will be separate, I guess.
Yeah, and honestly, technically that is supposed to be the case right now. I think technically in our bylaws, council rep terms are the same as board members. That in actuality, hasn't really been a practice. But yes, trying to, I guess, implement systems that better oversee the flow of council rep terms.
Yeah, because right now, like all the DSUs that I'm aware of, like they run their elections together, like the presidents, their finance, their communications, whatever, then together with like their council rep as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just want to get clear on like, are we trying to separate like the council elections like from their the other positions, their own positions?
Mm-hmm. I would, yeah, that's another consideration I suppose as well, is if we're trying to solidify council rep terms, we might assume that other student union executive positions would also follow that kind of pattern, of course, but still leaving flexibility for those other positions to be filled in accordance with their respective student union constitutions. Okay. So with this one too, I think there are some action items and data collection that we can do to help us kind of come to a more concrete answer, because I think right now we're just kind of going off of our own knowledge and understanding of how these systems work. But I think with some more knowledge on other student unions and our own data on SU elections, it'll help us a lot. Okay. Does anybody want to contribute to this discussion point on council elections anymore? I'll give this 10 seconds, but I won't count out loud. Okay, Balkis?
Whatever we do choose to go with after our research.
Wait, am I the only one who's not hearing?
Hello?
I think you heard.
I think it's Gabe.
Okay. Sorry, Gabe. But if the rest, what was I saying? Right. Whatever we choose to go with after our research, I do want to make sure that we're not policing how the constituency groups, the marginalized groups, are picking their representatives. So they want to be imposing on that. They can, they should be able to pick based on their own constitutions.
Yeah.
In line with their own constitutions.
Thank you, Balkis. I fully agree with that. And I think that's why I kind of wanted to focus this discussion more on student unions and why I wasn't really mentioning constituency groups, because I do also agree that constituency groups should have control over their elections and who they put forward. Go ahead.
And what about groups that aren't constituency groups, but like residents and like residence hall association, like have a seat? We have to figure out what we're doing for them as well, because I know they're not under SFSS, right? We don't have direct control or anything over how they run. So we do have to, I guess, make a new category for them and see how to deal with the groups that are not like they're like affiliates, not directly under SFSS.
Yeah. Corbett?
Yeah, I was going to say what Belky said. Just we probably have to have a new definition about this with Gabe offline about we should have some kind of either a different catch-all kind of definition for anything that doesn't fit within our definition of clubs, student unions, and like faculty and department student unions and clubs and constituency groups. That maybe it's just that we can define in policy, so that we need to change it or for the first bit until we figure out what this actually looks like, then we can put it into bylaws later. Which would include things like potentially like external constituency groups that are not under that they're their own independent organization or they're just not under the SFS, but they still serve members a certain section of the membership that's easily identifiable in different ways, not necessarily marginalized. So we can have a different title or a different name for it. I think it should be, but we should probably do our structures of recognition and stuff. That makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense, because I think right now we kind of just clump everything under the title of constituency group, like Residence Hall Association and Student Athlete Advisory Council and a few others that I'm not remembering off the top of my head are constituency groups, but they're not under the SFSS. They're technically out external organizations to us. So finding some kind of title for them as this affiliated group. Aren't they like a tier 1 constituency group? Or is that just a misunderstanding on my part? Balkis?
We refer to them as constituency groups, but they don't represent any marginalized communities. Like they shouldn't be called that, is what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
But like that is the category we have because we don't have anything else.
Okay. Okay. I think that is a misunderstanding on my part too, because I thought constituency group was just a a student group that represented a subset of the population, of the student population, whether it be a marginalized community or not. That's kind of why I thought RHA was a constituency group. But again, I think that's probably why we want to put a constituency group definition in our bylaws, so that that clarification is there. So then people know that a constituency group is representing a marginalized community, and then affiliated student group is anything else. Matt?
Yeah, I think a big part of this, what we're probably going to have to do is find a new form of like terminology to define the different groups, just like when we're making like the new election process, to like define them in a way that like is that properly correlates to their group, because we always have like DSUs, and then like what Belkis is saying is like constituency groups can fall under like any like group, but like for like, you know, groups like the FNSA is considered like a constituency group, like that has a totally different meaning when it's for specific groups. And so I think we're just gonna have to find new terminology and new ways to like properly define them so it's more accurate, and then it'll be, I guess it'll be more easier to follow, because right now it's so like ambiguous and just like lumping them all together when they have, you know, obviously their own constitution and ways that they run things. It'll be, I feel like, a little bit more easier once we have those definitions. And then I guess listing all the groups that would fall under, that would be appointed to council, finding all the groups that would fall under that and have a seat, and then, you know, I guess organizing them in a way, and then having them meet like certain like election like criteria, but obviously nothing that's like too straining or anything for elections. But I think maybe doing that would probably help, I guess, what we're trying to do. And yeah.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, so this is a good opportunity, I think, to define student groups and constituency groups, and from there kind of make decisions on its relationship with council and all that. So yeah, thank you, Balkis, for bringing that up. Did anyone else want to mention anything in relation to constituency groups and affiliated student groups? No? Okay. Matt?
So now also we're gonna have to like, because now we recognize like Greek organizations, right? So like, is that something that we're gonna have to talk about too in their relationship to like council? Like, are they going to be on council, or like how does that work? Like, that's what I'm also wondering too. Like, do we have to think about stuff like that now? Because we do recognize them now, right? Like that passed like not too long ago. I'm a little bit confused on that.
Balkis?
Right now we said, like, we voted on recognizing them as clubs, but it, like, honestly just depends on council. If council wants to vote them in to have a seat, then that's how that goes. But we do need probably need a category to lump like to sort Greek life orgs into. Like, I know they're clubs right now, but we might have to explore other options.
Okay, cool. That answers your question, Matt? Awesome. And the kind of last big thing that I wanted to talk about today was around associate membership. And this is a discussion that was coming off of, well, from the board table around having FIC students as members in the SFSS, and creating a class of membership for FIC students to be called associate membership. I believe that's kind of the name we've fallen on, but haven't really kind of concretely decided on. I think it was honorary membership at some point, but I'm not quite sure. However, I just wanted to bring this up here because I know this is something we are looking into, and I've been talking with Heather, the one who the board member who really has kind of been championing this initiative, and of course, to actually, well, first of all, to actually make this happen, there needs to be a bylaw that creates some type of membership for affiliated colleges or institutions. So what that essentially means is defining associate membership as a student who is registered in an affiliated college or institution where there's an agreement between the SFSS and that institution, and that agreement's ratified by the board to allow them to be members. That is something that can be put in the draft bylaws, but to actually bring FIC students in as members of or associate members of the SFSS, that still is a discussion to have with FIC, the FIC principal, and I need to communicate alongside Heather to get a membership list for FIC to actually hold a referendum to see if there's appetite on FIC's side to be integrated into the SFSS. But in the meantime, that what we can do on our end is draft bylaws on what that looks like. And I kind of, as I just kind of described there. So there isn't really much of a discussion that I wanted to bring here. I just kind of wanted to bring that forward. And of course, if anyone wants to add to what this process should look like, please do. I just wanted to put that on the radar of this committee. And if we're thinking at a more broader scale, in scope of our 3 special resolutions, we have the first one all about Societies Act compliance, the second one around student group definition and clarification, and special resolution 3, which is around board and council merger. This, notwithstanding the decisions we need to make around elections, we're actually doing pretty good on the board and council merger. Every time we kind of make a major decision, I have been going through and kind of adding them to a set of draft bylaws. So then we can kind of look at it as a whole afterwards. And the council stuff's looking really good, pending the decisions we need to make around elections and all that. Today, we kind of drifted into the waters of Special Resolution 2, which is clarifying student group definitions and clarifications. And of course, the last one is around society, or it's technically the first one, but last in this conversation, is Societies Act compliance and bylaw housekeeping, which is kind of just clarifying some stuff. That one is actually honestly probably the easiest out of the 3 of them. I'm not too worried about that one. However, I just bring this up because we need to start giving those 2 special resolutions some thought, because we've been focusing a lot on board and council, but we also need to remember that those 2 are also just as important in terms of making sure we're compliant with the provincial legislation and that our student group definitions are clear and defined in our bylaws. And in fact, what I think might happen is all of this stuff regarding some of the action items we brought forward today should be discussed at the bylaw working group. And then we can start talking more about Special Resolution 1 and Special Resolution 2 at the next governance committee meeting, make those high-level decisions, and then go forward and start integrating those into the draft bylaws. So I feel good about this meeting today. I think we kind of walked out here with some more action items rather than decisions, which is a good thing. It leaves us in a good spot to do some thinking and come back with some information to make some decisions. And that is it really from me on this discussion item regarding the bylaw review. I want to open up the floor though and ask if anyone has any other discussion that you think we should be having today. Balkis?
Gabe, when are you going to be able to contact and talk with AMS folks about their structure? Like, I hope it's before next governance meeting.
Absolutely. I was going to do that right after this meeting.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah. And also, please let me know if you. What I would like to do is set up a meeting with someone from AMS to ask some of these questions. If anyone is interested in that, please express your interest to me. And I'm assuming Corbett, you would want to be part of that discussion. Asib, as president, you would probably want to be part of that conversation too. But please let me know if you do not, and that is okay. But again, you can let me know now, or you can let me know via email or whatever. Okay, cool. So, yeah, I don't have much else. Helen just joined the meeting. I apologize because we're kind of wrapping up. Helen, if you want to actually stay behind after the meeting is done, I'll kind of catch you up.
Sure. And sorry, oh my God, I thought the meeting would go on until 4:30 and I just wrapped up some stuff at work right now. Hi, everyone. I'm so sorry I came at the end. This is not good.
You know what, Helen? Usually we go overtime, so I'm shocked that we are ending early today. So, yeah.
I'll just catch up on minutes or whatever you guys spoke about today. I am absolutely sorry. Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry, everyone.
Yeah, I can share the meeting recording with you too, and you can take a look at that if that interests you. So, but no, Helen, no need to apologize. You were here in place of Zaid, and I know it was kind of last minute too. We kind of just talked about this on the weekend, so please don't feel bad. It is all good. We're happy to have you here. So I apologize. I closed the agenda. Now I can't find it. Okay, so in terms of announcements, I don't have a time for the next governance committee meeting because the next semester is about to start soon and we all have new schedules. So also tonight, I will send out a when to meet to determine a time to meet. We now have what I was waiting on was for a board meeting time to be announced, but OSIP has announced that those will be Friday 1 to 4. So we can now go forward, I think, and move on to committee when to meets, knowing that information. So expect that too. So we can move on to adjournment then. Wow, I'm honestly shocked. So be it resolved to adjourn the meeting at 3:45 p.m. Does somebody want to move?
Matt?
Matt, thank you, Matt. Does somebody want a second?
I'll second.
Corb, I just about said Corbs. That's what I write down every time I need to write down your name. Any discussion on adjournment? Okay, I'm seeing none, so we can, all those in favor of this motion seeking unanimous consent. And I'm seeing no opposition, so we can consider the meeting adjourned. And that motion carries unanimously. Thanks, everyone.